Hello and happy holidays, people of the internet. We've arrived at our final day of Kung Fu Christmas, and the final film in the trilogy of the 36 Chambers. Now, this particular movie has the most split opinion amongst the fan base. Will we be able to find some gold in it, or will my personal biases win out? Let's find out as we dive into Disciples of the 36 Chambers. For this story, we follow a new character, Fong Shiyu, a young, gifted martial artist who unfortunately is also a terrible student, whose pranks give no end of headaches to his family and community. Unfortunately, these pranks soon turn deadly when he gets into a fight with the local Manchu government, one that is threatening to shut down his school and kill anybody that gets in their way. In order to save Fong and his brothers, their overbearing mother takes them to the Shaolin Temple, where they will learn Kung Fu under the wise tutelage of one legendary San Te. But old habits die hard, it seems, as Fong would much rather goof off with the other students than do any real training, much to the chagrin of his masters. What's even worse is Fong is determined to sneak out of the temple every single night and go party in the village, where he runs into, surprise, even more Manchu. A fight, like before, breaks out almost immediately. But strangely, this time, after the fighting dies down, the Manchu actually praise Fong for his skill and offer him a hand of friendship and hospitality should he choose to return. But it's all a ruse, as the Manchu Lord's true intent is to learn the secrets of Shaolin from Fong and then kill him along with the rest of the Shaolin students when the time is right. San Te, suspecting this evil treachery, attempts to steer Fong away from the Manchu's plot. But Fong, unfortunately, is too stubborn or childish to listen to San Te's warning. Will the legendary San Te be able to overcome the Manchu's devious plot? Will Fong be able to leave behind his childish ways before it's too late? This film sucks. I'm sorry, there's no nice way to put it. Out of all the three movies we've seen so far, this is by far the weakest of the trilogy. I mean, the story is all over the place. The writing is terrible. The humor's as subtle as a kick to the head, and honestly, it's sometimes downright unpleasant to watch. How is the plot of this film so hard to follow when it's riddled with this many cliches? I can't even tell if I'm confused because the pacing's just that bad, or it's because the decisions they make in this film's story are so stupid that I simply won't accept what I'm seeing in front of me. Now, I know, that was all a little over dramatic, so let me say this as objectively as possible. The story of Disciples leans on a lot of tropes and cliches, and rather than do anything interesting with them, it instead uses those same tropes and cliches to shore up its already bad narrative. The other problem with this film is the fact that it takes a very hard turn into comedy, even more than the last one. However, in Returns, where that film used humor to distinguish itself from the first movie, as well as add to its overall story, Disciples instead forgoes any kind of narrative nuance, and rather subjects us all to a non-stop cavalcade of barely connected, strung along, and awkward slapstick, along with a ton of really bad jokes, most of which probably don't translate very well outside of its native Cantonese.
Rain, frost, and snow are all the same. They're all forms of water. Teacher, if that's the case, why make them different? It could save the sky a lot of trouble, couldn't it?
Fang you eat food one end, it comes out the other. Why don't you instead just eat your shit?
There's an old stereotype about Kung Fu movies that basically says the plot exists more or less as an excuse to get to more fighting. Well, in disciples of the 36 Chambers case, they break from that tradition, as their plot is an excuse to get to more terrible jokes. How are we supposed to get into a film where every single scene feels like a setup to a bad joke with no punchline? Spoilers, you can't. 2 out of 5 stars. We're moving on. You know, the strangest thing to realize about this film is that the performances are terrible, but not because the actors are bad. More that they're not actually allowed to do anything good. It's said in filmmaking that very few actors can survive bad writing, and the writing for our character Fong is some of the worst I've seen. I mean, this guy's the protagonist, the main character, the person we spend the majority of the film with, and he is still the most unlikable, selfish, annoying piece of shit imaginable. I mean, how is his actor, Xiao Ho, supposed to bring in a good performance when this is the guy he's supposed to be playing? But what about the other characters in this film? After all, Gordon Liu is in this movie too, and he's reprised his role as San Tae. This is the guy that started out the whole franchise and put 36 Chambers on the map. Surely the film's gonna take advantage of the actor's skill and the great opportunities with this character work, right? Well, unfortunately, this film fails once again to take any advantage of a great character, as San Tae doesn't even show up until halfway through the film. And when he does, he's relegated to the side role as a humorless mentor who never breaks his boring stoic expression. It really sucks that this film refuses to utilize a great actor like Gordon Liu or do anything with his character. And honestly, that's a problem that translates to all the other characters in this film as well. With one notable exception, and that is the performance of actress Lily Lee. Lily Lee is a kung fu movie actress, a veteran of the industry, a fantastic martial artist, and honestly an oasis of entertainment in this desert of mediocrity. She plays Fong's overbearing mother in this movie, and somehow manages to give a stellar performance despite the terrible writing she's subjected to. It's also really entertaining to see that she has enough martial arts talent to give the boys a run for their money, which is always fun to see. The only thing that really holds her back is the fact that the comedy of this movie really does some weird stuff with her. Like this one bit where an evil guy tries to open up her legs. Trust me, as weird as it sounds, it looks even weirder. I honestly feel really disappointed every time I think about how good she could have been if she just had a little bit better of a script to work with. But that honestly sums up all my feelings about the acting in this movie. A disappointment. And for that reason, I can't give Disciples any more than a 2 out of 5 stars for acting. With so many issues in the story and the acting of this film, it's weird to acknowledge just how good the special effects are for this movie. The sets are immaculate, the props are well made, the lighting is masterful, and the wirework is simply fantastic. Though I think the biggest standout of this film has to be the costumes. Unlike the previous 2 films, the outfits on display in Disciples are way more varied and vibrant than the other films. Now, while this is a lot more in your face than we're used to, I think it matches the more bombastic tone that this film seems to be going for. Though the biggest compliment I could probably give this film is that the wigs actually look good in it. I mean, it's taken us nearly 10 years and 3 movies to get it right, but we finally Have some wigs that don't look like a dead animal crawled on some guy's head and died. I will say that one sore spot for this movie's special effects has to be the audio design of this film. I don't really know how to describe it, but the sound of fights in this movie just don't really feel satisfying to me. And that honestly brings down a lot of the action for this film. Now, while Disciples does fall into the camp of stereotypically bad-sounding kung fu flicks, it's still held up remarkably well and looks immaculate after all of these years. And for that reason alone, I'm giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. The erratic quality of this movie may have a lot to do with the time it was made. In the mid-80s, we saw a lot of technical improvements to how films are created, which explains why Disciples may look as good as it does. However, at the same time, the industry was experiencing a monumental shift. Kung fu movies at this time could no longer be made as quick or as cheaply as they once did, due in no small part to the growing popularity in the West. For this reason and many others, the Shaw Brothers Studios had begun to move away from producing movies and instead making television. In fact, this change occurred 1 year after the making of this film, which in turn means Disciples of the 36 Chambers was one of the last old-school kung fu movies that the studio would ever produce. It kind of explains why this film can feel so big and yet so rushed as well. This was a last hurrah for a lot of people involved. And unfortunately, being made so close to this transition period meant that Disciples also got swept up in a nearly 15-year embargo, one which saw a lot of late Shaw Brothers films never released to the international public. Now, thankfully today, all 3 of the 36 Chamber movies have been fully released and are easier to find than ever, including this one. However, in terms of popularity, the mere fact that the other 2 films had a nearly 20-year head start to this one, and that they were available in the West for that entire time, means that the Disciples movie has a bit of a disadvantage. Overall, this film has held up remarkably well and is by far the best looking out of all 3 films. However, its storied production, delayed release, and terrible translations means that this film leaves much to be desired. 3 out of 5 stars. And now, we get to the final part of the review, the martial arts. But is the kung fu in this film strong enough to actually save it? Well... Okay, I'm gonna be objective for a moment here and say the martial arts we see in this film is technically very sound. Its choreography is amazing, well implemented, and it's always a joy to see talented and skilled people pull off these sort of stunts. The problem with Disciples that it has to overcome is the fact that because it has such lacking story and acting, the kung fu has to come through that much more impressively in order to make up for those flaws. And the most frustrating thing about this movie is they almost managed to pull that off. I guess it shouldn't come as any surprise that the martial arts would end up being good in this film, because at this point, all the people are veterans of the kung fu movie genre, and it's very clear that everybody involved is committed to making the action look good. In fact, I'd say that fight at the climax in the last 10 minutes of this film is one of the most impressive things we've seen so far. that one fight alone might be the best kung fu action we see out of the entire trilogy. But this also kind of works to the film's detriment. You see, because by the time you get there in Disciples, you've already had to sit through nearly an hour and a half of a terrible movie just to see any of this good stuff. And, surprisingly, for once, we can't blame the swerve to comedy for this. Yeah, a lot of the action in this movie is based around slapstick. However, that's not necessarily bad, as slapstick provides a lot of opportunities for creative action. And to the movie's credit, it does try to exploit those chances whenever it can. The issue is the comedy's not strong enough to make up for this film's many flaws. And the parts that are really strong are all backloaded to the last 10 minutes of this film. And then it ends so abruptly, you don't really have time to enjoy any of it. If I have to give my unbiased review, I'd say the martial arts in this film is pretty good. Great, even. It's just a shame that it's trapped in a terrible movie. 4 out of 5 stars. And now we come to the end. It's time to tally up the final score for Disciples of the 36th Chamber. We've seen a lot bad and quite a few things that are good, but where will it stack up in the end? Let's see as the final tally is... Okay, 14 out of 25. Honestly, higher than I thought that'd be, but maybe that's due to my personal bias. Honestly, out of the trilogy, it's by far the weakest of the 3 36 Chamber movies, and you might want to avoid it if you do a Kung Fu Christmas this year. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for these holidays. So, until I see you next time, people of the internet, I'm Theo Y, and have a happy holidays. I'll see you soon.